All right, so yesterday we talked just a little bit about production possibility curves. So you want to make sure you have those notes out, ready to go. I just had barely started before class was over. I'm talking about the difference between a capital good and a consumer good. So I want to make sure that you guys have that, you understand that, because when it comes down to it, your basic understanding of the difference between a capital good and what it belongs to and what a consumer good is and where that belongs is actually really, really helpful. We're talking about at the end of September, aggregate demand and aggregate supply. If you have a basic kind of understanding of capital and consumer goods, it's really, really helpful. So we're going to start with capital goods and just the basic definition of a capital good. So a capital good is a good that makes another good. A good that makes another good. All right, a capital good is a good that makes another good. Now, again, you might think, well, that's going to be a lot of things, right? Like a hammer, or it could even be like pizza sauce, or it could be like coffee beans or something like that. Okay, when we talk about capital goods, we're talking about things that businesses buy to make other goods. We want to be even more specific. So businesses buy. So what you should think of in your head is like big factory machines. Like that's what we're talking about. Now, could a hammer be a capital good? If you're a carpenter, then yeah, it could be. The AP test doesn't get that specific. Okay? Just think in your head like big things that businesses buy, like building a factory, or like robots that help to put cars together or something like that. Those are the types of goods you need to have in your mind for capital goods that we're talking about in here. Because when we get to ag demand, ag supply, that's going to have a big effect on the ag supply line, your kind of basic understanding of capital goods. Something that the AP test likes to use, another term for capital goods, is the term capital stock. You'll see that quite a bit, and if you can put that even on your test, like what increases ag supply? You'll come to, again, we'll learn that at the end of September, but if you put an increase in capital stock, again, you're going to have a reader want to come and give you a hug at your house, which wouldn't be creepy at all. So capital goods or capital stock are like machinery that businesses invest in to make more goods. Okay, the story I like to tell, you guys may not know this, I don't know that I shared it, but when I graduated high school, I wanted to be a cop because I thought like driving around in a car really fast and carrying around a gun sounded like a good time. It still does. It sounds like an awesome time, actually. So I went and got an associate's degree in criminal justice, and in the process of doing that, I got my EMT. And so I was an EMT and then a firefighter for like 8 years throughout college and then a couple of years after college. And so I've been on a bunch of calls. You guys will get stories about decapitation calls that I've been on, and one call where some guy blew up a trailer that I was standing right outside of, and all these other types of things. But in order to cement or sear the idea of capital goods in your head, I'm going to tell you this story. So we're sitting in the fire station, just kind of hanging out. A call comes in and says, woman trapped in a machine. That's all it said. That's what the call is. So we go to this it's an industrial park. It's a couple of, 3-4 story buildings. And so we go into it, and what had happened was this woman, she was a temporary worker, and she was hired basically to just put 2 ends of a t-shirt into a big machine. The machine sewed it together. Like that was what the machine did. So she's putting this material in the machine, and her hand got sucked into it. So when we showed up, she's sitting on a chair because the people who worked there with her got her a chair, and she's passed out, and they'd gotten the face off the machine, and there's blood and stuff like that. So you can't just sit there and yank her out of the machine, right? We have to take apart the machine in order to get her out as gently as possible. So the paramedics come to, and we tourniquet her arm, and paramedics are giving her stuff to, with the pain and not to make sure she doesn't bleed out and stuff like that. So we're taking apart the machine. About 15 minutes later, we get the machine apart enough to get her out. So when we pull her out, about mid forearm down, her hand degloves is what they call it, which meant all the skin just off her hand. And if you're interested in medical stuff, it was really, really interesting. I had to see the radial arm, the radial bone, and the radial artery that carries all the oxygenated blood to your hand. It was intact until about wrist, and then it just, it deteriorated. And you got to see bone, and your, when she was in and out of it, and we asked her, like, can you do this with your hand? Can you move your hand and your fingers at all? And she was able to kind of just barely move them in that. Your tendons are like gigantic rubber bands. And so it was like somebody doing this with a rubber band. It was really kind of, and just barely moving. So if you're like gripping stuff, you can imagine what that looked like. But it was super interesting getting to see like the bone structure of the hand and stuff like that. So if you have to like think about what a capital good is, just think about the woman, a hand degloving off the machine. So there you go. That was, like I said, one of the calls. I'll tell you other ones that I was on. But that's a capital machine. When you think capital goods, don't think of a hammer. Think of a big, like, industrial park with big industrial machines. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Things that will help businesses to produce a big amount of goods quickly. Okay, that's what we mean by capital goods. They can be hammers and smaller things, but think big. Okay, we're macroeconomics, not micro. So think big. Okay, the other type of good is a consumer good or consumption good. Those are goods for final use. It's what you and I buy. Like basically everything you and I buy is a consumer or a consumption good. So think of like everything you've bought in the past week plus you. That's probably a consumer good. Okay, unless you own your own business and you're buying something to make another good. But like gas or your car or pencil or notebook, all those things are consumer goods. Okay, the food you buy and all that kind of stuff, all those are consumer goods. They're meant for final consumption. So yesterday, if you remember the straight line production possibility curve, the one that looked like that, what did we call that type of production possibility curve? Good, constant cost. That meant that, remember, the ratio was 1-to-1. Okay, that meant for every one you gave up, you gained one. And the ratio just needs to be 1. I mean, it could be you gain 5, you give up 5, or whatever. This type of thing where you have consumer capital goods, you tend to have a production possibility curve that looks like that, bowed out. This will sometimes come up on the AP exam, so just a heads up. Again, these are like the first 3 or 4 questions on the exam. Tend to do with scarcity, opportunity, cost, production possibility curve, stuff like that. And this bowed out curve is something we call increasing costs. Increasing costs. All right, increasing costs. And there are points on and within the production possibility curve we're going to go over here in just a second. But this is an increasing cost, one that's bowed out. In theory, there's something called a decreasing cost that you don't need to know, but it's bowed in. We do take those on the AP, like when we're grading the FRQs, we do take bowed in FRQs. That usually is somebody who doesn't know, like either doesn't understand PPF, or it's somebody with really nice handwriting that did it for whatever reason. But they're either straight lines or bowed out. Don't draw the ones, this is what I mean by decreasing. I'm bowed in, something like that. Okay, we take those because we don't really know if the kid is just trying to draw a straight line or whatever. Make sure that your dots, like this one, notice how the line doesn't really intersect with the graph. Again, a reader's not going to sit there and take a lot of time to make sure, like, do your lines intersect? But if it's obvious that they don't, like I left a little bit here, a reader's not going to really worry about that. Okay, what they'll worry about is something like this. Okay, that's not good. Okay, or something like this. Okay, that tends not to happen, and usually that's a kid trying to hedge their bets. The ones that it happens on are the people trying to do decreasing costs. You don't see this, okay? And the reason why is there's a lot of debate whether or not it's even mathematically possible to have decreasing costs. So don't draw a boat in line, at least on the AP test now. All right, so you have an increasing cost. The reason why you have increasing production increasing costs here is because the amount of capital goods that you can produce, a country can produce, is fewer than the amount of consumer goods that they can produce. Okay, so increasing costs means, again, the amount of capital goods. Now again, it could be anything. They could put, the AP test could put peanut butter and liquid nails, right, on it. And then they have an increasing one. They're not going to ask you to draw it. But it could be increasing for whatever reason. What that's saying is, and I'm going to put some numbers up here, the amount of capital goods, and the reason why they're fewer is because it tends to take more training, or what we call human capital, to produce capital goods. So we're going to put this as robots. So your capital goods are robots here. Okay, then consumer goods. Usually consumer goods are pretty simple goods. Okay, now your phone, we're all going to probably sit here and say your phone's a little bit more complex than a simple thing to put together. But most consumer goods tend to be things you can mass produce. Okay, think about like a tractor factory in the middle of Iowa, because that's all Iowa's known for, tractor factories. Okay, so a tractor factory in the middle of Iowa, that's going to take a lot of resources to produce that, right? The machines that go in the factory, the factory itself and all that. But to produce the machines, once you get people trained on the machines, you can produce a lot quickly. But the tractor factory is a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot of know-how to do that. And so your consumption goods, we're going to do these as pizza, because who doesn't love pizza? All right? You do, let's say, 50, 100, 150, 200, 250. Now, this is the study and leisure time thing that we talked about yesterday. Okay, it's just using, instead of study and leisure, we're using robots and pizza. Okay, so could this country, and again, when I say the country produces, right, it could be, it's usually businesses, or if I say government or whatever, governments, remember, can incentivize producing certain things. They can put tax breaks, they can subsidize, they can throw money at it in different ways. But so if I say government, I don't mean the government itself, but typically mean that there's companies that are producing it. But in this country, they can produce two things, robots and pizza. Okay, now if only they could produce a robot that made pizza, that would be even better. Which is happening. There are actually vending machines I saw on a couple college campuses that you like put in what you want on your pizza, and then the machine makes the pizza and cooks it for you, then it pops it out. All right, so the machines will take over soon. Once they learn how to make pizza, it's only a matter of time, really, before we have Terminator 3. All right, so this country, remember, they could produce all capital goods. What's the most capital goods they could produce? That's all they produced. 7, right? And then that would leave them with how many pizzas? 0. Good job. So just like you, let's say this country decides they're going to like mix up what they're making. And so they want to make 5 robots and 200 pizzas. We're going to put that as point A. I didn't give you guys a materials list, partially because I'm against them, because I have little kids and we get materials lists from their teachers. And the communist way that they do that with like 50 pencils. And I'm like, 50? My kid goes through 3. But it all goes in a bin, so we buy them 5 pencils. Okay? And it's like 46 glue sticks. And I'm like, what? And it all goes in a bin, so we buy them like 3 glue sticks. All right, so I don't do supply lists because I'm like really, really ardently against them. But if you want, some people, like I'm very visual, so you'll notice I write different colors a lot. And I think that that helps those of you that are visual like me. And so, like, if you want colored pencils for this class to write in different colors, if you think it'll help, that's something that people have bought in the past that have helped. All right, so A, which is on the line, okay, the point A actually has a name to it. Okay, and we call that efficient use of resources. A is efficient use of resources. A is efficient use of resources. So it means it's on the line. Now again, it can be anywhere on the line. It could be 6 robots and whatever, 175 pizzas or whatever, if that's on the line. Those two number combinations are on the line. Okay, that's efficient use of resources. That means that the workers who have the best skills to build robots are building robots. The people who have the best skills to make pizza are making pizza. All your factories are being used to their utmost efficiency. Like, think about it as like it's the maximum amount a country can produce. Okay, if everything is used the best way possibly can be used for, then that's the maximum amount of stuff that country can produce. Okay, that's point A. That's efficient use of resources. Point A is a theoretical point. Okay, no country actually gets to point A because there's going to be some unemployment. Unemployment is not a way that you maximize your resource use. Okay, there's going to be some land that's not being maximized use. We call that Detroit. Okay, in this class. All right, so there might be some land that's not being maximized to its best output. Yeah, there might be a situation where capital equipment is rusting and stuff because people aren't taking care of it or whatever the case may be. You're not using, no country uses its resources to its maximum potential. Okay, just because you're on near or you're not on the line doesn't mean you can't push the line out, but if you, in order to be on point A on the line, you'd have to maximize your usage of resources. Okay, most countries, well, every country, if A is theoretical, that means every country is not on at A. Most countries can do this. If they're using their resources, they're using, let's say, it's some combination of 5 and 150. So we're going to call that point B. Okay, point B. So that's inside the curve somewhere. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you put point B, just as long as it's inside. So A is on the line, B is inside the line. And point B is either, I've seen the AP test use the term inefficient use of resources, which actually your textbook and all the tests that you're going to take, okay, that's the terminology it uses, inefficient use of resources or idle resources. Okay, I've seen the AP test use the term idle as well. So that means, what do I mean by idle resource? It doesn't mean like people are just standing around looking at one another. Okay, well it can, because they're unemployed. Okay, there's some kind of unemployment. As we get further into this class, okay, the cool thing about macro, something that I think a lot of you will like, something that some of you will be driven nuts by, okay, there's about 5 graphs that you need to memorize for macro. That's it. Okay, micro is like 12, but you need about 5 graphs that you have to memorize. This is one of them. And all 5 of those graphs 100% correlate with each other. So if there's a movement on one, it affects all 5 of the other graphs. Okay, for some of you, it's like, sweet, it all like connects. And for some of you, like, suck, I can't even remember one graph. So really, it kind of depends on what camp you're in. All right, so if you're like, if you like things connecting, macro you're gonna love. Micro, for those of you that are like, I like concrete things. After I'm done learning this box of things, I like moving on to the next box of things. That's micro. Macro is not. Macro is all like meshed together. Okay, fewer graphs, but that means if one thing is manipulated on one graph, all the rest of them change. The nice thing is once you like find the Rosetta Stone of graph manipulation, it all makes sense very quickly. Like if you start getting how the graphs interconnect, like this class becomes clear. Okay, if you really struggle with that, it's like you're looking at this class through, I don't know, water that's, again, Detroit water, like brown and disgusting. Bodies. So once you kind of get that, like how graphs are correlated with one another, this class goes super easy, and it does. Okay, because A actually is a point on the ag demand, ag supply graph. A is a point on the Phillips curve. A is a point blah, 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 blah. and so is B. So B is, like I said, it means you have unemployment. It means that your capital equipment may not be being used. Maybe a factory has to shut down a portion because people aren't buying their stuff. Okay, so B is inside. There's some kind of idle resource. The last point is point C. It's just outside, like it's somewhere outside the production possibility. C is what we call unattainable, okay? Or sometimes you'll see it used as unattainable in the current situation. Doesn't mean you can't get to C, but things have to change. You have to push the entire line out to get to C. A country can't produce at C and then go back. If A is theoretical, it's the best you can do, if it's the most efficient use of all your resources, that means that you can't get to C without pushing, right, your production possibility curve out. And we'll go over, there are 5 things that a country can do to push the production possibility curve outwards. Right now, the US is probably running pretty close to A. Okay, make production possibility curves great again. So we're pretty close to A. But we won't get on the line because there's going to be, and some unemployment is good. Okay, some idle resources are okay. You don't want your factories running 24/7, or we'll talk about what the bad consequences of that are. But again, it's okay. Or C is unattainable, like I said. We'll talk about it.
So it's theoretical too.
C? Like to get to C?
Yeah, it's impossible.
It's not impossible. There are ways that you push the production possibility curve out, and you can do that while also like producing inside, because that's where everybody's producing. But there are steps you can make where eventually you get to C, but your production possibility curve is going to be like out here.
Oh, so it's going, okay.
Yeah, so it's past where then you actually produce. All right, any questions about this? All right, the last little bit of this, and then we'll go on to what changes or what pushes your production possibility curve out, is the reason why this is increasing costs. Okay, so you're gonna, let's just say for E's sake, you're producing at point A. I know it's theoretical in real life, but this is econ, so we work in theoretical. All right, so you're producing at point A. That's 5 robots and 200 pizzas. Okay, the country decides for whatever reason, okay, there could be a multitude of different reasons, they want to produce 4 robots and let's say 225 pizzas. Yeah, that works. All right, 225 pizzas. You lost 1 full robot and you gained 25 pizzas. Not bad. But the way this is drawn, if you just did 7 robots and no pizzas, and then the country decides, oh, we're gonna drop the robots because we need something to eat, and we're gonna make pizzas. The gain, your initial gain is like 150 pizzas. As you begin to drop more and more robots, your gain on consumer goods gets fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. And so it's increasing costs. Think about kind of the opposite. As many as you're gaining fewer and fewer, and so it's actually costing you more per robot as you're giving up, okay, per pizza. So again, you gain like 150 pizza, awesome, to get 1 robot. But then when we get down going from 5 to 4, you only gain 25. So it's increasing that cost. Okay, your robot per pizza is going down. And the reason for that is because you're going to start to move resources that are probably better equipped at making robots. You're moving them into pizzas. So Mr. Mechanical engineer, okay, he's probably better served making robots. He could probably make a pizza too, but he's better served actually making robots. But there might be a myriad of reasons why you move Mr. and Mrs. Mechanical engineer into pizza making. Maybe another country likes your pizzas. Or maybe there isn't a need for robots because the machines have taken over. Okay, so, and they're building themselves. Okay, so there's a lot of there's other things that could happen to go from those points on the line. Another thing to think about too is capital equipment. Okay, it's purposely written up there. I think I told you guys, it takes a lot of resources, like I said, to make capital equipment. So really quick story. Just imagine for a second, okay, I crash land in a desert island. That doesn't look like me. I crash land in a desert island. Okay, so desert island, if you watch Naked and Afraid, Shark Week, which why would I be watching that stuff? My wife is obsessed with Shark Week, which means I usually fall asleep at about 7:30 on the couch. All right, so I crash land, Desert Island, there it is. If you want something to Netflix, binge on Netflix if you haven't. Lost is a great series, except for it's off Netflix. Oh, Amazon Prime then, or nothing at all. All right, so this island looks like it has a lot of resources, but I explore it and it really doesn't. All it has is a bunch of palm trees that don't produce anything. So I have to fish. So I wade out into the ocean. I wait for, knowing my patience, about 10 seconds. And I reach down to grab a fish, and that's the best I can catch right there. And I realize that's not going to do anything, right? Fish are consumer goods in this case, okay, because they're meant for last consumption. All right, so I decide I teach econ, I can make a net. There's my net. I'm making it out of bark, my back hair. Don't worry about where I got the knife. All right, so I'm making a net. What am I not doing when I'm making a net? Fishing, right? And although those tiny little fish, I could catch a lot in the span that I'm making the net, right? So I'm increasing my cost, right? That's a capital good. It's going to produce another good, fish. Okay, the net will. So I make my net. I cast it off. I'm a pretty good caster. What can I say? All right, and I end up with a ton of fish. Okay, so don't worry it's on a boat or that there's metal on there. There's another guy sitting there. All right, so I made myself worse off in the short run by making capital goods. Okay, it cost me a lot of fish. However, in the long run, I'm better off. All right, and it also allows me to concentrate on anything. If you've watched Tangled, Flynn Rider and myself hold the same dream, which is an island by ourselves surrounded by enormous piles of money. Like my dream is the same as Flynn Rider's. And so instead of fishing, I make shelter, and I'm a pretty good shelter maker too. All right, so it allows me, again, if I invest time in making capital goods to, again, make final consumer goods, which is fish, it allows me to invest my time and energy into other things. All right, we're going to talk about how we make, that's basically what that means, how we make the production possibility curve shift outward. So shifting outward is a good thing. That's what every economy looks to do, whether you're North Korea or the United States or China or whatever, you're looking to push your production possibility curve outward. It's bad news if your production possibility curve shifts inward. But there are these 5 things. I'm going to talk about them in a positive way because what can I say? I'm an eternal optimist. All right, but I'm going to talk about them and pushing them outward. But if these 5 things work in the reverse order, okay, you can push the production possibility curve inward. And we'll talk about a historic example. And we could talk even about a current example here. We'll do both. That'll push the production possibility curve inward. All right. So there are 5 things. The first one is increasing your productive labor force. Keyword, productive labor force. That may take a while. What's one way you can increase your productive labor force? There's more than one, but what's one way to do that? Okay, even before that, even before education.
Having babies?
Yeah, good. Countries having kids. Okay, industrial countries, we tend not to have as many kids. In most industrial countries, the U.S. isn't quite like this, but in a lot of industrialized countries, okay, the birth rate is lower than 2. That's bad because even though science has come a long way, you still need 2 people to make a baby. And if you don't understand that, then ask your parents and tell them that Kasarag told you to. All right, so you still need 2 people to make a baby. And so having a birth rate under 2 is bad news. That means you're actually decreasing your population. Okay, but if you like if you can up the population by natural birth rates, even so Sweden, they actually have commercials that say like grandma should watch the kids and you, husband and wife, should go off on a romantic getaway, because Sweden has negative growth, negative population growth. The only reason why the United States has positive population growth is because of immigration. Like immigrants have more than 2 kids. Okay, so why is it that industrialized countries have fewer than 2 kids? Why is it that people choose to have fewer kids in an industrialized country? That's probably a better way to phrase that question. Yeah?
Because like being pregnant takes you out of working and you don't have to take care of the kid.
Good job, excellent. Because having a kid, they're expensive. And they're expensive in that way, okay? That means that it costs women specifically, because again, science has come a long way, but women are the ones that carry babies. Okay, so women then have to drop out of the labor force. Maybe they work all the way up until they give birth, but your body has to heal. Okay, and so women are out for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months, a year. My wife has been out of the labor force for 10 years. Okay, it's an expensive thing because we forego her income. She has a college education, and so she could make a lot of money, but we've chosen to have her stay at home. It's an expensive choice. On the flip side, little buggers are expensive. On the other side too, you got to feed them because they eat. It sucks. You got to house them because they really get like, let's camp outside again. And it sounds fun the first like 3 or 4 days, but then they want back inside, especially when it gets cold. And then they want sports and all that, and you got to clothe them, and that's expensive, and all this kind of stuff. And like, so kids are expensive in that way too, and especially in areas where the cost of living is super high. So kids just in general are expensive. Okay, so in industrialized countries tend not to have as many kids. But if you can increase that, another way to increase your productive labor force is immigration, bringing immigrants in. And that's what Europe does. Okay? Europe allows a lot of immigration. The United States does too. So you can do this through immigration too. Another thing you can do as a country to push the production possibility curve outward is increase the quantity and quality of natural resources. Now, just having natural resources is not a key to having economic success. There are a bunch of countries around the world with a ton of natural resources that you probably don't want to live, like Russia. Okay, that's one that has tons. Nigeria. Okay, some of these countries just are rich in natural resources. And then think of England. Okay, they have bad teeth and a rock, and that's really all they have to offer. Okay, as far as natural resources, fishing. Is maybe what they have to offer. Hong Kong, it's a rock. Okay, that's all it is. But it's one of the richest rocks in the world. UAE, it's a sandbox, but they're really, really rich. So having natural resources doesn't guarantee anything as far as economic success. It's the way you can use them, and also, I mean, political structure has a lot to do with it too, but it's the way you use them. The United States has gone from a major oil importer, like we used to buy oil from around the world. Now we're the world's largest oil exporter because we've gotten better at pulling oil out of rock, fracking. So we've discovered that, but we also improved the quality of the natural resource too. So the U.S. actually, we end up exporting a lot of our oil. I don't know why that changed colors. Your quality, increase the quantity and quality of capital goods. That's like my little story of me going fishing. So if you can increase that, that's a good thing. Okay, invest in capital goods. Now, again, you're trading off consumer goods. And for a lot of countries, a lot of developing countries, if they have the political structure that allows this to happen, they do. They start investing in capital goods. They make a lot of consumer goods, okay? And we'll talk about like looking to where your shirt is made. But that's going to be like a lot of developing countries. And as they move past that, as they continue to increase their capital goods, then they move past textile and other types of cheap goods, like Hong Kong, Taiwan, and all that. Okay, increasing the country's health and education. Okay, so that goes with what you were saying, Sydney. Increasing their health and education. If you're worried about dying, you're not going to be very productive. Just the way that it goes. If you can't read, it's difficult to be productive. If you have a whole country of people who can't read or write, it's difficult to pass along information. Okay, so health and education. And the last one is technology. If you can increase the country's technology, okay, but you need an educated workforce in order to be able to use the technology. So a lot of these, again, kind of intermix. Now, again, you can go backwards. Okay, if you have a situation where a lot of people die, like, let's say, a war, okay, that's a good way to shove the production possibility curve the other direction. Especially when you're destroying your natural resources on top of it. Okay, and your probably health is going to become an issue, right? When you're filled with bullets, you're not very healthy. So a lot of this stuff you're not going to school to. So a lot of the stuff wartime will decrease production possibility curve. Natural disasters will do that. So the hurricane is about to wall up Hawaii. Okay, people aren't going to go to work when they're worried about their house flooding and blowing away. So you lose the productive labor force. They're staying at home. Okay, the health-wise of things. Okay, they're worried, and so they'll stay at home. And so natural disasters, or if you have a situation like a major earthquake, well, that will wreck your capital equipment. It may wreck your technology. Certainly going to wreck hospitals and schools. And so then again, you have a situation. So natural disasters, not good for the economy. Okay, even if you reinvest and start rebuilding, not good for the economy because you're now set back a certain amount, and war is not good for the economy. All right, real quick, we're going to do comparative and absolute advantage, which does tie into this. So you want somewhere where you can write a little bit. I also sent out through Schoology. If you didn't see the message, you should have received it, but if you haven't, just been checking Schoology nonstop, because I know that's what you do. I know I do that. Then check your messages. There is a message that I sent you, like reminding you what's due on Monday, but also it gives you a link to a YouTube channel that you're going to really, really appreciate. It's called AC/DC Economics. It's not the guys from the band, unfortunately, but it is a really good guy. He's an experienced AP reader, and he put together this channel that's basically everything we cover. And so he's pretty awesome. Mr. Clifford is his name. But his comparative advantage stuff is awesome. Okay, because you'll get all this stuff, and on top of it, he'll say, all right, let's practice a problem. He'll give you the problem, and he'll say, pause it. Hopefully you do. And then you work through the problem, then you hit play again, and then he'll work through the problem with you. So it's a link that I already sent you. All right, so let's talk comparative advantage. So there are two types of advantages that countries, people, any entity really has. Okay, and there's absolute and comparative advantage. So we're going to do the U.S. and Japan. Okay, we're going to focus on two industries. Let's say the car industry and the computer industry. And in some kind of set amount of time, okay, the U.S. can either produce, we'll make this pretty easy, 5 cars or 10 computers. Okay, they can produce any combination of those two, but then let's say they're going to invest in either producing one or the other. And Japan, okay, they can produce 3 cars or 9 computers. Using the resources that they have. Who should produce cars and who should produce computers?
Let Japan produce computers.
Okay, why?
Because they have the comparative advantage.
Okay, maybe you've already gone and looked through the comparative advantage thing. Okay, the first question that's usually asked is who has an absolute advantage? Here's the definition of having the absolute advantage. Okay, you can either produce more of something, or produce the thing faster than someone else. So it's either more than or faster. Now, if you did the blue book, I want you guys to bring it Monday because I wanted you to at least have this. So if you need to go back and recheck the blue book and redo it, you can. Okay, there's input and output problems, right? An input problem deals with time and land. Those are the two things it deals with, time and land. Okay, so an absolute advantage would be somebody who can do something faster. Okay, so it's two people and one person can vacuum the room faster than another. Okay, one person does it in 5 minutes, one person does it in a minute. The person who does it in a minute has the absolute advantage. They do it faster. Or land usage. One country can produce paper by using 3 acres of trees. One country can produce it by 5 acres. The country that only uses 3 acres, they end up having the absolute advantage. That one's a little bit tricky. But when it comes to output problems, which is what you typically see, okay, those are final goods, like cars and computers. Okay, so if it doesn't say time or it doesn't say land, then you know it's an output problem. So the absolute advantage is just simply the bigger number in an output problem. Okay, the US can produce 5 cars, Japan can produce 3. The US has an absolute advantage because 5 is a bigger number than 3. Okay? Same with computers. The US can produce 10, Japan can produce 9. So the US has an absolute advantage in computers because the number is bigger. On the AP test, if it asked you, let's just say it said, who has the absolute advantage in computers? And it says explain. The US, you don't even have to write because, you can put BC. 10 is greater than 9. And if you did that, that's your explanation. Some reader is going to, again, want to come buy you lunch. Okay, because that's like the best thing to see as a grader. That's all you need. You could say 10 is bigger than 9. You could write a sentence if you wanted to, but this will get you the full points. 10 is bigger than 9. So then US has the absolute advantage. 10 is a bigger number than 9. Comparative is a little bit different. How I find comparative advantage, I set up a little T-chart. US on the one side, Japan on the other. And I would say it's who has the comparative advantage in making computers. So what I want to find out, what's the easiest way to figure this out, is saying, all right, if both made one computer, how many cars are they giving up? So comparative advantage, here's the definition of comparative advantage. Okay, you can make something at a lower opportunity cost. Lower opportunity cost. So make something at a lower opportunity cost. Make something at a lower opportunity cost. All right, so we're going to find out who has the comparative advantage in making computers. US can make 10 total computers, Japan can make 9 total computers, but it's what they're giving up in order to make the computers that we're interested in. Okay, a way to kind of make this make sense maybe in your head is, let's say you have a sibling and your parents do what any good parent does, like the best part of having kids is the fact that you start passing on chores and stuff you don't want to do to them. Like my kids pick up the dog poop in the backyard. Awesome, I hate doing that, so my kids do it. And I don't like vacuuming, my kids do it. I can't wait till they can start doing laundry and mowing the lawn. Right? If they can eventually change oil, I actually kind of like doing that. So then I'm going to pass along all the crappy chores I don't like doing to them. All right, so your parents say somebody needs to mow the lawn and pick it up, and somebody needs to pick up the inside of the house and vacuum. And you know, okay, my sibling is a couple of years younger than me. They get easily distracted, like, ooh, shiny thing, right? But does it make sense for you to do both jobs? Even if you're better at them than both. You're better than your sibling at doing them. Should you do both? No, right? You should split up the work. Have your sibling do one of them that they're better at, and you do the other one. Okay, that's you're finding your comparative advantage. That's the same thing here. The U.S. shouldn't just make cars and computers and Japan just sit back. Okay, instead they need to find out what they're better at doing when they're giving up. Okay, when they're giving up the other thing. So, if I want to find out who has a comparative advantage in computers, I want to see what they're giving up for one computer. So, for every one computer that they give up, okay, I want to figure out how many cars they're giving up. The easiest way to do this, how do you get 10 down to the number 1?
Divided by 10.
Good, divide it by itself. If I'm doing that to the computers, I need to do that to cars too. So how many cars is the United States giving up when they make a computer? Half. Here's the other thing about AP, and you'll hear me say this again and again. If you get really funky numbers, you're doing it wrong. You can't use calculators on the AP test, and so the numbers shouldn't come out to be like if you're starting to divide things, you're like, holy crap, like, then stop, and you probably got the equation flipped or something. Okay, so if you don't get simple numbers, then stop what you're doing and rethink the problem. Okay, AP is all about simple numbers. So 5 over 10 you should have gotten as a half, hopefully. Okay, in Japan, for every one computer, how many cars is Japan giving up? So if you're dividing this by 9, you got to divide that by 9. A third. All right, so here's how you want to think through this, okay? It makes sense in my head. I don't know if it'll make sense in yours. I see Hey Jack is back to his old, letting people have 2 minutes before the actual class is done. Okay, is the world better off, let me finish this though, I know it's about that time. Is the world better off if the US makes computers because we're missing half a car? Or is the world better off Japan making computers and we're only missing a third of a car? Okay, so Japan's opportunity cost is lower. That means you should produce computers. Japan, right? Their opportunity cost is lower. You want to go with the smaller number. Okay, the second smaller number means that whatever the first thing that you put in this equation is what they should focus on. A third is smaller than a half, so Japan should make computers. We'll talk a little bit more about that on Monday. We'll go over your blue book a little bit on Monday. And we'll go on from there. All right, you guys.